December 1st, 1987, Townsend, Massachusetts. A pregnant 33-year-old Priscilla Gustafson and her 2 young children are found murdered in their home, a home that had been broken into just 2 weeks earlier when nothing much was stolen, but items in the house had been moved. When police arrive on the scene, they already have an idea as to who the killer is, a 17-year-old boy who had already been arrested for kidnapping and frogging. This is the story of Daniel J. LaPlante. Find me if you can. Hey y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Pottorff, and welcome to Hitched to Homicide.
For better or worse,
till death do us part.
welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome, or...
Oh, no.
To all of our Greek friends across the way. Let me see if I can get this right. Hang on. Kalos ήρθατε. Okay. I knew I wasn't going to get it 3 times. I'm just going to do it the 3rd time. Kalos ήρθατε. There we go. Dang it. It's the first time I've ever messed up.
Oh, gosh. Oh, honey.
I know.
Can I just say right off the get-go that somebody tweeted that Rob's voice, that they liked my voice, but that Rob's voice was smooth AF.
Oh.
So
well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Now I feel like I need to talk like this all the time. But I'm just here to tell you that welcome in Greek, that was not smooth. Well, we're glad you're back with us this week. Yep. Wherever you're listening, be sure to like, rate, and review.
Please review.
That helps people to find us. Yeah. It did not get past me that everybody was sending their Spotify and tagging us in their Spotify playlist for 2022. So many of them you guys sent. We were right at the top. Hitched to Homicide was number 1. We love that. And in fact, we've had our biggest download day ever.
I know. It was crazy.
It was absolutely nuts. But that's all because of everybody that's here right now.
So cheers.
Thank you. Be sure to join the In-Laws and Outlaws. If you haven't done that, just go to Facebook. You can answer a few questions, and then you're in. We have a lot of fun in there. We're also on YouTube. We did take a week off. My mother passed away the day before Thanksgiving, but thank you to everybody who sent in their support and their sweet little messages. It meant the world to me. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Sure did.
Really appreciate it. Mwah. Sending out kisses.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about today's case.
What? Talk about it.
Do you know what frogging is?
I have no. I used to go frog gigging when I was a kid.
Now, I said this to him a couple of days ago, and I said, "Do you know what frogging is?" And he goes, "Yeah, it's like you frog gig. You go out and you catch frog in the middle of the night." No.
I was born in the country, so
and that's a southern thing too. That's a well. Where do you think frog legs come from? But that's a southern thing. But frogging, this is PHROGGING.
Is it like a rap thing?
No, it's secretly living. That was really showing your age, honey. Is that a rap thing? It's secretly living in somebody's home. It's a reference to how frogs leap from place to place.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And this story has an element of frogging.
Okay.
And this would be my worst nightmare. Somebody living in the house and we don't know it. And we have said this before because we're empty nesters. Yeah. There are parts of our house we don't go in.
Yeah.
Somebody could be sleeping in a bed upstairs with the door shut.
They could have been up there for months.
Yeah, Rob tries to make me be energy efficient. It's like, shut off that vent, shut that door, turn those lights off.
Trying to save pennies.
And so, so there could be somebody in one of those beds sleeping up there. Highly unlikely.
Well,
but
Scotty would sniff them out.
Well, Scotty would sniff them out. And by the way, that is not an invitation, but yes. Before I get started today, I want to thank some sources: the Lowell Sun, Mass Live Media, the Boston Globe, TalkMurderWithMe.com, All That's Interesting, the Celtic Sentinel, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts versus Daniel J. LaPlante, the Cinemaholic, the Berkshire Eagle, the Daily Hampshire Gazette, and childmind.org.
Okay.
Lots of them.
All right.
Are you ready?
Well, let's do it.
Now, before I even begin this case, I want to say that I researched, and yes, I said it 3 times on this one. The juvenile records for this guy aren't available, and because this case is so outrageous and has become sort of an urban legend, I will give you exactly what I found out about him, and some of it contradicts itself, so I'm going to give it all to you, and then perhaps we can have a discussion about it online in the In-Laws and Outlaws.
All right.
That's a good reason to join.
Yeah.
Daniel J. LaPlante was born on May 16, 1970, in Townsend, Massachusetts. He grew up in Townsend with his mother, Elaine, and his stepfather, David Moore, and 2 brothers, Stephen and Matthew. Now, not a whole lot is known about his childhood except for the fact that it was traumatic. Danny was physically, psychologically, and sexually abused by his father and apparently his stepfather.
Oh, that's too bad.
He was never a good student. He was awkward, non-social. His classmates thought he was weird, and Daniel had a strong aversion to hygiene.
Okay.
He didn't bathe, and he would wear dirty clothes to school, and he smelled bad. And because of this, his classmates avoided him, and he stayed to himself. Which, I mean, okay. You can't really fault anybody.
No.
Yeah, for that.
Sure.
Not the washing part, the staying away from the washing part. Down the road, and when he's an adult, doctors will say that he has what's known as conduct disorder as a child. And symptoms of conduct disorder include not caring about social norms or good behavior, ignoring the rights and feelings of other people, enjoying causing harm, lying or manipulating people, committing physical or sexual violence, hurting animals. All the things that we always say, this is setting this person up to be like a serial killer.
Yeah.
And in younger kids, lying for no reason, stealing for the fun of it, and extreme bullying. In older kids, it's picking fights, lying, cheating, stealing, destroying property, and physically or emotionally abusing others. Now, I mentioned that he struggled academically in school, but he was dyslexic. And he didn't have any help from the school or from home or anybody with this disorder. It wasn't realized until he was much older. And because his behavior was so off-putting and bizarre at school, his school counselor wanted him to see a psychiatrist.
Okay.
So somebody steps in and says, look, this he ain't right. We got to get him,
He needs a little help.
He needs some help. So they get him in to see a psychiatrist. And Danny is diagnosed with what today we would call ADHD. And at the time, they just called it hyperactivity.
Sure.
But instead of treating Danny for his issues, the psychiatrist started making sexual advances toward Danny once he gained his trust and eventually began sexually abusing him.
Wow.
And this is a kid who's been sexually abused before.
Sure.
So maybe to him this seems normal, but I mean, like not in a twisted sort of way, but you know, that he's an adult and this is acceptable.
Right.
Regardless, the abuse went on for over a year, and when his time with the psychiatrist was over, Danny was 15 years old and even more screwed up than when he had arrived for treatment. During the ages of 15 and 16, Danny would burglarize homes in his neighborhood, taking little things or more often moving things in the house around.
Really?
Or he would drink or eat something from the fridge. It was more of an I'm here statement than the taking of valuables.
Wow.
He'll get to the taking of valuables. But first, while breaking into homes, Danny makes his way into a home at 93 Lawrence Street in Pepperell, Massachusetts. It's the home of Frank Bowen and his 2 daughters, 16-year-old Tina and 9-year-old Kathy.
Okay.
It's while he's here that he sees a family portrait, and 16-year-old Tina is in the family portrait, and he's smitten. Now, at the time in 1986, most phones, most landlines had the little number marker on the phone.
Okay.
And my family had this. It's like you can't remember your own phone number or something, but on the dial in the center would actually be the numbers.
I forgot all about that.
For your phone number.
Sure.
And so he actually takes this little marker and puts it in his pocket for future reference.
Just in case.
Now, this family, the Bowens, they are in mourning because the father, Frank, and his 2 daughters had just lost their wife and mother to cancer. But in late 1986, Tina gets a phone call from a boy named Daniel LaPlante.
Okay.
He tells her he's 16 and that he got her number from a mutual friend. He got her number from the telephone in her home.
Right.
He also tells her that he lives in the same neighborhood that she lives in. And these two start talking on the phone. A lot. And Tina liked talking to her new friend. They did not go to the same school.
Right.
But so for whatever reason, Danny LaPlante in person wasn't all that and a bag of chips. But on the phone, he was okay, I guess.
It's sort of like today's Twitter.
Okay. What does that mean?
Well, you can have a personality on Twitter and, portray yourself as something. But when you meet the person in person.
Well, that's true for any online presence.
Yeah,
I mean, the Instagram, the filters on everybody's phone now. Who is this person?
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. But Danny tells her that he's blonde, muscular, athletic, 6 feet tall. And he's brown-haired, brown-eyed, 5'11", 130-pound kid with bad acne who doesn't bathe.
Yeah, that sort of sounds like the equivalent of catfishing.
A little bit. But sometimes those people are like women pretending to be men.
True.
I mean, at least he's a guy saying he's a guy, but he's just saying, hey, I'm like 6 foot and I'm built and I'm blonde and I'm athletic, and he's not.
Everything he's not.
But Danny could only play that game for so long, and eventually he asks Tina out on a date to go to a local fair one night, and Tina accepts. But when he comes to her doorstep to pick her up, well, he's not who he said he was. And it's like a bad Tinder date or something,
right.
Which is exactly what we just talked about.
Yeah.
I wrote in my notes, the photo doesn't look like the person.
Right. She's going, where's Danny?
Yeah, where's the guy that I'm supposed to be going out with? I also wrote in my notes, be safe when you're online dating, guys, people, ladies, gentlemen. Always meet them at a public location. Let a friend know where you're going and what time you're going there. Or better yet, have a friend, someone come with you and sit in that public arena and watch over you like the CIA.
Yeah.
You just can't be too careful these days.
Right.
So there I am. That's Chris being a mom, telling everybody just be careful out there.
Right.
But that being said, Tina is less than impressed with what she thought was going to be her tall, hot dude. And instead she got Danny. She goes out with him and they go to the fair. But about an hour into the date, Danny wants to know more details about Tina's mother's death. He's obsessed with the death of her mother. And eventually, Tina's had enough of that for the night.
Sure.
And not long into the date, she's ready to call it a night. And she kind of makes it known that she's not interested in seeing him again, something that Daniel isn't too happy about.
He doesn't take rejection well.
He does not take rejection well. But I have also read a newspaper article that he did come back and they did have another date. And he actually went to the movies with Tina, and Frank, her dad, drove them over Easter weekend that year. So again, lots of different sources, lots of different stories. Okay?
Maybe she was just being nice.
Yeah, maybe. She was not into him. I also read that she went to school and said, that she was dating Daniel LaPlante, and they were like, dude, he's like weird and you shouldn't do that.
Right.
Now, a few days later, and who knows if this is something that's been added to the story to make it more interesting, but believe me, I don't think anything needed to be added to this to make it interesting. The two girls, Tina and Kathy, hold a little seance in the basement of their house. They're trying to contact their mother. I've read there was a Ouija board. I've read that there wasn't a Ouija board.
Stay away from the Ouija board.
We saw one this weekend. I was like, don't touch it. But I've also read that there wasn't even a seance. But I think this part is true. I think there was a seance, but it does make it a really good urban legend based on what's about to happen.
Okay.
Days or weeks later, depending on which source you use, weird things started happening in the home. Frank's daughters, Tina and Kathy, start telling their dad that they're hearing knocking in the house. And the girls think it's their mother. They've tried to contact her, and they think they've been successful. So in the beginning, it's some sort of like simple tapping that they hear, but then it starts to keep them up at night. And also, things are starting to be moved in the middle of the night.
Oh, no.
And the television station is changing when the girls leave the room. Or there'll be a glass of milk left out on the counter. Or someone drinks the milk and leaves the carton out on the counter.
That's called foreshadowing.
That is called foreshadowing. You're so good. My work here is done.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Good night.
My work here's done. And here's what's going on. Daniel is frogging. He's living at times inside the house undetected.
Wow.
He is squeezing through a space in a bathroom behind a toilet between the concrete foundation and an inner wall. It's really hard to explain.
Whoa.
So I will post a drawing that was made by a police officer showing the layout, but there's a separating wall that separates the plumbing pipes from the toilet.
Right.
It's like this little blank triangular dead space in the house.
It's like when the Escape from Alcatraz, how they got in behind the wall there and shimmied up the pipes and escaped. So there's a space there where all the pipes and everything are.
And that's where he's living, in this very small space in their home. And I don't think he's there all the time. A lot of the sources were like, he's living there.
Right.
He's constantly living in this home. I think he's in between their home and his own home.
Sure.
That's just Chris's take on the whole thing.
It'd be pretty hard to take a nap in a...
He could sleep in there.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And according to some sources, one night when the girls are home alone, the tapping starts again, but it sounded like it was coming from below them. So they grab a knife and they go into the basement, and on the wall in the basement, in what looked to them like blood, was a message written on the wall, quote, "I'm in your room, come and find me."
Wow.
End quote.
Holy cow.
Now, these two yeet on out of the house like nobody's business, and they go to a neighbor's home until their dad comes home. And Frank is thinking that his daughters were doing the tapping and the writing on the wall, which, by the way, was not blood. It was written in ketchup, not blood. But that they're doing this just for a cry. It's a cry for attention. And again, according to some sources, Frank sends his daughters to therapy for this.
Oh, geez.
But they're young, and if they had just lost their mother, therapy's always a good idea. I encourage everybody, go to therapy. It's wonderful. If you can find a therapist right now, everybody's in therapy.
Yeah, true.
But the tapping stops for a few weeks. And then in December, it starts again. The knocking, and it sounded like it was coming from one of the girls' bedrooms this time. So they run up the stairs with the kitchen knife, and on the wall in Tina's room, written again in what looked like blood, but was ketchup, it says, "I'm back. Find me if you can."
Wow.
Now, out of the house, they rush again to the neighbor's home. They tell the neighbor, yep, more writing on the wall. The girls call their dad and tell him the tapping's back. There's more writing on the wall. And Frank comes home from work early and goes back to the house with the girls, and he sees the writing and finds one more phrase that the girls didn't mention. At the top of the stairs, it says in ketchup, to look like blood, "Marry me." Exclamation point.
Yeah, I'd be going to live with Grandma at this point. Jeez.
Yeah. So Frank now realizes there's more to this story than meets the eye. There's something hinky going on in his house.
Right.
And clearly someone is getting inside their home, but they have no idea that he's living there part-time.
That's just wrong.
Then on December 8th, 1986, Frank and his two daughters and a friend come home to 93 Lawrence Street, and what they discover is that someone had used the toilet and items in the home were out of place. Now, I want to stop for a second. When I read that someone used the toilet, well, how can you tell if somebody used the toilet unless they just didn't flush? Is that a nice way of saying that?
I'm going to guess that's
he left a present in the toilet for them.
Or he left the lid up.
Yeah, but the dad lives there too.
Yeah, but listen, when you're living with females, you learn, put the seat down.
Well, Rob has learned, put the seat down. So there. But Frank searches the house. They see, someone's been in the bathroom. There's stuff out of place. And Frank searches the house. He's had enough of this. And what he finds is Daniel hiding in a closet.
Oh, geez.
He had spiked his hair. He had painted his face white. And he was wearing a furry jacket.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of reports that say he was wearing a blonde wig, and he was also wearing one of Frank's dead wife's dresses. But I read a police blog, and it's one of the things the officers on the scene say never happened.
Gotcha.
He was not wearing a wig, and he was not wearing a dress, but he was wearing like a furry coat.
Okay.
And he did paint his face.
Right.
And in one of Daniel's hands is a hatchet, and in the other, a wrench. And very calmly, he orders all 4 of them into a bedroom, and he shuts the door. And Tina actually slips out a window and runs next door to the neighbors. These neighbors have got to be like, what the hell is going on over there?
We got neighbors from hell.
So she goes over to the neighbor's house, and they call police. And the call comes into the police that there's an intruder holding people hostage at 93 Lawrence Street in Pepperell. And when the police arrive, they find Frank, his 2 daughters, and the friend. They're all unharmed. And Daniel is nowhere to be found.
Okay.
And the police search the house, and a state police canine dog also searches the house, but they didn't find anything. And here's the thing. When the police ask about the guy that Frank sees in the closet, and they ask the girls about the same guy, Frank says that the man was roughly 22 years old, and the girls said that he was 6 feet tall. It's Daniel. He's 16 years old, and he's 5'8". Tina didn't even recognize the guy who's wielding the wrench and the hatchet as the weird guy she'd been on the date with.
Well, I mean, if you spiked your hair and you painted your face white, it would be pretty hard to identify.
And you're afraid.
Yeah.
So they got the details all wrong of it.
Right.
But the Bowdens pack up, and they get the heck fire out of the house.
Oh, yeah.
2 days later, police get a phone call to come back to the house. Frank has gone back to his home, and before he can even step foot inside to pick up some of the girls' stuff, he sees a face in the front window of his own home that he locked up and left.
Wow.
And it's the same face that had taken them hostage 2 days before.
Jeez.
It's Daniel. So Frank waits until the police show up. And first on the scene is Officer Bezanson. And when he drives up, before he can even throw his prowler into park, Frank is pointing at the house. And the officer said he knew that Frank was going to say, there's a guy in the window.
Right.
There's somebody in the house.
Okay.
So police get the house keys from Frank, and they check the snow around the house for fresh tracks into the house, and then they go inside. And Officer Steve is kind of thinking, there's nothing to this. But when he opens the front door, the first thing he sees is a knife sticking out of the wall, and it's stuck through a family portrait of Frank, his late wife, and the 2 girls, Tina and Kathy.
Wow.
I mean, it sounds like a horror movie, right?
Yeah,
right? Yeah.
You can't script this.
And written on the portrait in magic marker are the words, I'm still here, come find me.
Jeez.
And on another wall is another photo of the family with another knife through it, and it says, I'm going to kill you all.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I thought I had it bad years ago when I had a neighbor that just had a barking dog.
Yeah. So Officer Steve calls for back up. He's like, get some people here.
Yeah.
And the police chief, David Young, and Sergeant Jim Scott show up, and all 3 start searching the house for the face that was in the window. And according to the police blog, Officer Bezanson said, quote, that bastard is still here. We're missing something, end quote. Too good of a quote to leave out.
Oh, yeah.
And when they're in the bathroom and the police ask Frank about the layout of the room, they're like looking at it and they're like, this doesn't really add up. He tells them, well, there's a wall to hide the bathroom pipes. It's like a triangular space in the corner.
Okay.
Again, it sounds confusing, and I will post sketches in the In-Laws and Outlaws so you can take a look at it. When they get behind this space, what they find looks like a pile of clothes. And they realize there's a person under those clothes. And when I read that, I thought, this is like our dog Scotty, who's like underneath a blanket and it starts to move. And you're like, oh, there you are.
Yeah.
You're under the blanket all the way.
Yeah.
But this pile of clothes starts to move. And according to the police officer himself, he said, quote, I got the son of a bitch right here, end quote. And he tells him to show his hands or, quote, I will splatter your brains all over that wall, end quote.
What was his point?
Yeah, get out. Get out of the crawl space.
Yeah.
And with a gun to his head, Daniel remains eerily calm and collected. Now, the space is just big enough for him to sit in a crouched position. This is what you were asking about.
Mm-hmm.
Or sleep in a fetal position.
Wow.
And he accessed this space by squeezing through a narrow opening. Now, there are sources that say that there was access to the crawl space from where he was hiding that gave him access to different parts of the home where Daniel had created peepholes to watch Tina and the other family members. I don't know if that's true or not. I think he was confined to this little cubby hole. And I don't think he was there all the time. Again, I think this was part-time.
Right.
He was just there enough to wreak havoc and knock on the walls and stuff. I don't think he could see them.
Was there access to the outside? Is that how he got in?
No, he's getting into the home and then getting into this little crawl space.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do they know how he's getting into the home?
No, but he gets into a lot of homes. He breaks into a ton of homes.
All right.
And remember, it's 1986.
Sure.
And a lot of small towns, I hate to say this, in a lot of small towns in the 80s, nobody locked their doors.
Yeah, that's true.
They just left the door open.
Yeah.
The neighbor might need something.
Yeah. Sugar's in the cabinet.
Yeah, exactly. They pull him out and take him to the police station to book 16-year-old Daniel LaPlante. And Danny is held at a juvenile facility because he's only 16.
Right.
He spends 10 months from January 1987 to October of 1987 in juvie, turning 17 on his birthday, May 15th. And in October, his case is transferred from juvenile court to adult court because he's 17. And since he's now going to be charged as an adult, this means he can post bail, which his mother takes care of by remortgaging her home.
And that's a bad thing.
That's a big mistake.
Yeah.
Big. Huge.
Huge.
Mm-hmm. So he's released out of juvenile detention on this $10,000 bail bond on his charges, which are 4 counts of kidnapping, 4 counts of armed assault in a dwelling, breaking and entering a dwelling, larceny of more than $100, and malicious destruction of property.
Wow.
Now, this $10,000 bail bond and his release is going to become a very controversial move by Judge Joseph Traveline, because the bail guidelines are the risk of the defendant fleeing, the type of crime that is alleged, and he's frogging in their home for a couple of months. Yeah. And he threatened him with a hatchet. How dangerous he is comes into play, and if the community is going to be at risk if he's released. But the judge was like, okay, we'll let him out.
Nice.
He did not choose wisely.
Yeah.
And after he's out on bail, a date is set in Middlesex Superior Court for December 11th, 1987, but Daniel is never going to make this court date. Now, Daniel is released October 1987, and he moves home. And as soon as he's out, on October 14th, 1987, he breaks into a home in his neighborhood in Townsend and steals 2 .22 caliber guns and $1,000 in cash.
Wow.
That's 2 weeks after he's out of juvie.
Yeah.
He gets a $10,000 bail bond and he's out.
And he's not stealing that $2,000 to pay back the bond.
No, $1,000 in cash. And no, he's making his parents pay for it.
Yeah.
Then on November 16th, just a month later, he breaks into another neighboring home, the Gustafsons. He steals a cable box and some other items, including a cordless phone.
Why the cable box?
Because he ain't right.
Well, okay. I don't even know why I asked that.
And after this, he desperately begins his quest for bullets for that .22 that he stole from the first home.
Okay.
And he's practicing loading and unloading the gun.
Yeah, that's not a good sign.
And his brother Stephen and Stephen's best friend Michael Pulowski see the gun and the wad of cash that Danny has, and they kind of ask him about it.
Yeah.
And Michael agrees to sell Danny bullets for the .22. And he agrees to do this the last week of November because Danny wants to make a, quote, big bullet out of small ones, end quote. Well, I read that too, and he's clearly not the sharpest tool in the shed.
Yeah.
And here's the 411 on the Gustafson family. Andrew, his pregnant wife, Priscilla, and their 2 children, 7-year-old Abigail and 5-year-old William, live at 3 Saunders Road. And Priscilla Janine Morgan Gustafson is born on January 13th, 1954. In Havelock, North Carolina, she married her husband Andrew in 1975. She has a brother and 2 sisters, and her parents, William and Jean, are both congregational ministers who served in West Brookfield and Great Barrington, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Priscilla was a preschool teacher at the First Congregational Church and the proud mother of Abigail Morgan Gustafson, who was born on December 8, 1979, and is a second grader at Spalding Memorial School, and her son, William Andrew Gustafson, who's born on November 12, 1982, and had just turned 5 years old.
Okay.
Now, on the day of December 1st, 1987, Andrew had left for work early. He's an attorney, and he had an early morning meeting. He kissed his wife, his 2 children goodbye, and Abigail went off to school, and Priscilla and William go to preschool where she's teaching. And around 1:30 in the afternoon that day, Priscilla and William leave the preschool and are seen arriving home at 1:45 that afternoon.
Okay.
Now, sometime between 1:45 and 3:30 that day, Daniel LaPlante crosses the woods that connect his backyard to the backyard of the Gustafsons, and he enters their home. And I've read that when he heard Priscilla come home, his first thought was to jump out the window. But then he changes his mind. He locks 5-year-old William in a closet, and then he restrains Priscilla on the bed using makeshift ligatures and gags her with one of his own socks.
Ugh.
Then he beats her, rapes her, and sodomizes her before putting a pillow over her face and standing over her on the bed and firing 2 shots into her head.
Oh, my gosh.
Then he takes little William from the closet and he drowns him in the upstairs bathtub. At 3:30 p.m., Abigail gets off the school bus and she walks with her little friend Megan to the long tree-lined lane that led to her home. Abigail walks into her home expecting her mom and little brother and instead encounters Daniel.
Yeah.
He's getting ready to leave the house. Abigail screams. She puts up a fight as evidenced by the hair that had been pulled out of her head. And her neighboring little girlfriend heard her screaming because she was out chasing her pet rabbit in the backyard. And later, this little girl's going to take the witness stand and tell the jury this very thing.
Right.
Abigail, who was due to turn 8 on December 8th, was found with her clothes in disarray, and she had scratches and bruises because she fought him. But he took her to a downstairs bathroom where he choked her and drowned her as well.
Wow.
Then Daniel leaves the scene, and just a few hours later, he attends a birthday party for his niece.
Oh, my gosh.
Not business as usual.
Wow.
Nothing to see here. Move along.
Wow. Talk about being able to compartmentalize.
Well, and they say he's very calculated, very calm. You know, they've got a gun to his head in this crawl space, and he's just like, whatever, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, during all this time, Andrew Gustafson had been calling his wife all afternoon. And when he finally gets home, he sees that his house is dark, but his wife's car is there. So he goes into the house, he calls out for his wife, and then he goes into the kitchen and he calls the neighbor to see if his wife and kids are there. And they're like, no, she's not here. So he makes it to the master bedroom, turns on the lights, and finds his dead wife on the bed, pillow over her face, shot in the head at close range.
Wow.
He leaves the house and calls 911. Later, he's going to be asked why he didn't look for his children. He's asked this question on the witness stand during the trial.
Right.
And his answer is, quote, "I was afraid I would find them dead," end quote, which is just heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Now, police gear up for action, and they start looking for any evidence they can. But according to a police blog, they already thought, I wonder where Daniel LaPlante is.
Yeah.
This is his territory. He just lives around the corner. We know he's been burglarizing homes, and he was in the Bowens home for weeks. And it was true because he was living with his mom and his stepdad less than a mile away from the Gustafsons' home.
Right.
On December 2nd, police interrogate Daniel, tracking him down at the Townsend Public Library. He denies any involvement in the murders and told the police that he had been home watching TV all day. And then he attended his 6-year-old niece's birthday party. Now, they don't have enough evidence at the moment to arrest him. Although they think he's definitely a suspect, they decide they'll come back with a search warrant to look inside his parents' home, which they did. But as they get close to the LaPlante home, they see Daniel standing on the porch. He sees the cop car pulling up, and he turns and runs into the woods. Daniel's flown the coop.
Yep.
And in the woods that separate the Gustafsons' home from Daniel's parents' place, police find on a pile of rocks a shirt and 2 non-matching gloves. And the shirt belongs to Daniel, and the gloves are still wet from the water in the bathtub where he murdered the children.
Wow.
And with the scent from the shirt left behind, the K-9 team is able to track through the woods to about 3 feet outside the LaPlante home. And at that time, they're 3 feet away from Daniel's house.
Right.
And at that time, it was starting to get dark, and the K-9 dog had rustled up a mess of skunks in the area. And the police were afraid that the skunks would spray and contaminate the area.
Right.
So they stopped for the night.
Okay.
But inside the LaPlante home, the police are going to find a sock that has the hair of Abigail attached. And at the murder scene, there is semen on the bed, and it's later going to show that it's Daniel's DNA. An APB is put out for Daniel LaPlante, and a manhunt begins. There were K-9 dogs, a state helicopter, and more than 50 state and local authorities hot on his trail. And a warrant is issued for his arrest for 3 counts of murder. He was considered armed and dangerous, and police think that Danny will leave Townsend, his hometown, and where the command center was located. And a few of them had the thought that, well, he'd been frogging in the home in Pepperell. So maybe he's gone back there. He knows that area well.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And their hunch was right, and so is yours.
Yeah.
They use his photos from his booking from the frogging and kidnapping incident to ask around about Danny. Have you seen him? And when they get a positive response, the state police joins in on the hunt in that area.
Okay.
Lieutenant Thomas Lane of the Pepperell Police Department pulls his car, say that 3 times fast, pulls his car into the driveway at 124 Jewel Street. The owner of the home is Lynn McGovern. She walks away from her house and approaches his cruiser, and Lynn tells the officer that she's just gotten back home again and she's afraid to go into her house alone.
Oh, wow.
Now, they've said, the media has gone out and said, this guy is out there and he's armed and dangerous.
Right.
She has a hinky feeling, like the hair on the back of her neck is standing up, and she's afraid to go into her house.
Trust your instincts.
And this officer is thinking, we've set up this whole perimeter around this wooded area, and she's kind of messing with my part of the plan, like to carry out my end of the deal over here.
Right.
But he doesn't refuse her. He goes into the house. And it's a good thing, because Daniel is upstairs in her home watching their every move from a window.
Oh, gee whiz.
He has with him a revolver,
Ugh.
a shotgun, and a high-powered rifle.
Wow.
All from her home,
Wow.
okay? When Lynn McGovern enters her home, she sees a 16-gauge shotgun lying on the floor at the top of the landing, and she screams. The police clear the house, but Danny had jumped from a second-story window onto the garage roof, and then he ran off into the woods. So this 17-year-old is eluding 50 police officers through these small towns.
Sure.
And a little bit later that day, Pam Michaela, who lived at 17 Elm Street, came home to find Daniel inside her house.
Oh, man.
At gunpoint, he tells Pam that she is going to get him out of town, going to get him out of the area where the manhunt is happening.
Wow.
And why did he need her to do this? Because Danny only has his learner's permit.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
I know, right?
Wow.
Now, about this time, Pam's phone rings. They're standing in the house. Pam's phone rings. Daniel tells her, pick it up. And it's a relative telling Pam that Danny's on the loose and be careful. And she's staring at him while this conversation is taking place. And these two get in Pam's van and actually drive past a police cruiser. But it's dark by this point.
Sure.
And I guess just like Nightmare on Elm Street with Freddy, this Elm Street wasn't well lit either.
Wow.
Because she's driving right past it.
Jeez.
When they near the town hall, Pam jumps from the moving van.
Good for her.
And another motorist watches this happen, and Danny drives away without his licensed driver next to him.
Right.
The other car stops and picks Pam up to take her back to her home, where they again pass the same police cruiser of Lieutenant Thomas Lane. And she tells the officer, everything she knows. That, yes, it was Daniel LaPlante. It was Danny. She gives a description of her van, the plates, and which way Danny is heading. And get this. Rob's going to love this.
Uh-oh.
The van is a bright orange VW van with a pop top and 2 neon for sale signs in the window.
All that was missing was the pointing fingers on the springs on the top of the van.
I mean, pretty easy to see driving down the road, right?
Jeez.
Yeah.
Danny.
Yeah, so they're like, this is what you're looking for. And I read in this one police blog, he was like, we couldn't have found it any easier if it had been a clown car.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Danny is spotted driving the van in Ayer, Massachusetts. He dumps the van and goes it on foot, and the police are thinking, this guy hid in a tiny space in a home undetected for weeks. He could be hiding anywhere.
Yeah.
But the people of the
Better check all those tree stumps.
Yeah, but the people of the towns and the surrounding areas were calling in tips faster than a hairpiece flying in a hurricane. And at 6:30 p.m. on December 3rd, 1987, police find Danny crouched inside a dumpster at a lumber yard 11 miles southeast of his home.
Wow.
He's in a dumpster.
Well, it's kind of apropos.
It really is. And apparently he peeked his head out of the dumpster and one of the cops yelled, do we have a positive ID on him? And another one yelled, yeah, I arrested him last year.
Wow.
And Daniel LaPlante was taken into custody without incident. But according to some sources, he was laughing hysterically.
Jeez.
And they ask him if he's armed, and Danny says no. But when they get him to the Massachusetts State Police Department in Concord, they strip search him and find a gun hidden in the crotch of his underwear. It was the same .22 that had been stolen from Lynn McGovern's home. And I wrote in my notes, I don't know if I'd want that sidearm back again after that.
Well, and what year?
You can keep it.
Yeah, what year was this again?
1987.
Yeah. Searches are a lot more thorough these days than they were back in 1987.
They would have frisked the cookies.
Yeah.
They would have frisked it all.
You ever seen that video?
I know the one you're talking about where the guy is frisking him and he goes, what is this? And the guy goes, it's my penis.
The best video on YouTube.
The guy that's being frisked has got to be proud. So
I'm famous. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, goodness. But what's perplexing to the authorities is just how calm this scrawny 17-year-old kid with acne is. He's so calm. Lynn McGovern tells police that along with the .22 from her home, they're also missing an ammunition belt and the 16-gauge shotgun ammunition, and a search of the woods behind their home turns up the ammo belt with 15 rounds. So was Danny planning on heading into the woods heavily armed? He's ready for a shootout.
Of course, yeah.
Ultimately, he's charged with the murders of Priscilla, Abigail, and William, and a myriad of other charges stemming from his antics while he's on the run from the police. And this was all on top of the charges for frogging and kidnapping the Bowen family. Now, here's all the evidence that the police collected along the way. A .22 caliber bullet casing found at the LaPlante home, which matched the 2 found in the Gustafson home.
Okay.
The gun used to shoot Priscilla was found by Daniel's stepfather in the glove compartment of a junk Jeep Cherokee, which sat in the yard at the LaPlante home.
Okay.
A ballistics expert would testify at trial that the bullet casings found at the Gustafson home were found to be a match to this gun.
Okay.
A pair of Converse sneakers, which matched the prints in the flower bed at the Gustafson home, were found in Daniel's closet. A sock with saliva was found, which police believed had been used to gag Priscilla.
Right.
A necktie, a sock, stockings, and pantyhose, which had been fashioned into ligatures. One of Danny's socks was found to have fibers which matched fibers at the Gustafson home, and they found a strand of hair belonging to Abigail on a sock. They also found the cordless phone that had been stolen from the Gustafsons, and a thumbprint which belonged to Daniel was ID'd on the phone.
Danny didn't do very well in trying to conceal anything.
Yeah. And the semen stain on Priscilla's bed matched Daniel's type A secretor, because DNA is still very new at this point, but they could still match it to him.
Right.
So he's charged with these 3 counts of murder. And how do you think he pleads?
Oh, of course, he's not guilty at all.
Not guilty to all 3.
I didn't do any of that.
Now, while he sits in the jail in Salem, Massachusetts, which I was like, I know that's not funny to anybody else, but I love the whole witch story of Salem.
Yeah.
He receives these letters from Larry Brocklebank.
Okay.
Larry is a 36-year-old with a criminal record. He writes to Danny in jail because he wants to trade information with Danny for a reduced sentence that he was serving and facing in New Hampshire and Massachusetts for theft and check fraud.
What information?
He wants to be like pen pals. He's thinking if he can get Danny to talk to him, he can give this information to the authorities and they're going to reduce his sentence.
Okay, I get it.
Yeah, Larry's thinking.
Yeah.
He's thinking. And Danny writes back. He writes back to him and says the state police don't have anything on him and that they would never find the gun he used to shoot Priscilla. Now, all of this is going to be argued out of the courtroom. The jury never sees any of this at all.
Why not?
Because his attorney, the defense attorney, argues it out of court, that it's all hearsay. It's not a confession.
Not relevant. Right.
Right.
Okay.
But of course, they have the gun that was used to murder Priscilla. On October 3rd, 1988, Daniel LaPlante's trial begins. He's now 18 years old. He's undergone a psych eval, but he's been deemed fit to stand trial. And even though he's a minor when the murders take place, Judge Robert Barton says, yep, we're trying him as an adult.
There you go.
The assistant DA, Thomas Riley, represented the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and Daniel's attorney was Robert Sheckeltoff.
Okay.
Robert, I'm sorry if I messed up your name. Because of the widespread fear and publicity this case drew, there was a change of venue to Springfield, Massachusetts, and the whole jury was sequestered in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Wow.
There were, of course, alternates, but ultimately a jury of 7 women and 5 men are going to decide Daniel's fate.
Gotcha.
The prosecution called 50 witnesses, some of which were Daniel's own family, to the stand. And the defense attorney for Daniel, Robert Sheckeltoff, called, you want to take a guess?
I have no idea.
0.
Really?
He called 0.
Really? Wow.
Daniel's attorney argued that the evidence was all circumstantial and that the murders could be linked to another member of the family and a friend of his brother's, Michael Polawoski, the guy who gave the bullets or sold the bullets, I should say, to Daniel.
Yeah.
And in his closing arguments, Daniel's attorney tells the jury that something hinky is happening in the LaPlante family. He didn't use the word hinky, but he said, quote, something weird is happening in this family. The operating phrase is blame it on Daniel, end quote.
Okay.
After closing arguments, the jury took, how long do you think to come back?
About 35 seconds.
5 hours. 5 hours to come back with a verdict of
guilty. As sin.
And Judge Barton sentenced him to 3 life sentences to be served consecutively.
Wow.
There is no death penalty in Massachusetts.
Right.
Then in 1993, Daniel appealed his conviction, saying that the search warrants of his home shouldn't have been granted because his brother had an attached apartment and some of the evidence was found there in that apartment that proved his guilt. His appeal was denied.
Yeah. Nice try, pal.
And according to sources, Daniel has not exactly been an easy prisoner to handle. In 2000, he requested that he be moved for his own safety after receiving threats from other prisoners. His request was granted, and he was segregated from other inmates. Then he sued the Board of Prisons for not allowing him access to the library, which he couldn't have because he was segregated.
Right. Oh, my gosh.
He received $450 for his, quote, rights being denied, end quote.
Okay.
Then he got his panties in a wad when his porn, which is contraband that someone sent him in the mail, was confiscated.
Oh.
Massachusetts State Prison only allows commercial erotica. So I guess a Playboy, is that what that means? Commercial erotica?
I have no idea.
Bridgerton on Netflix, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah.
But he was complaining that his First Amendment rights were being restricted.
Oh, I'm sorry, Daniel. We'll make it better for you.
Yeah. In 2013, Daniel said he was not being allowed to, quote, properly exercise his faith, end quote, while in prison. He had decided to become a Wiccan. And in order to worship, he demanded that he be brought various, I've got my air quotes up, ritual oils, which included dragon's blood, black opium, and honeysuckle.
Oh, Daniel.
And apparently he also required carrot cake.
I didn't know that carrot cake was an essential part of being a Wiccan.
Yeah, right? And by the way, the Wiccan organization has distanced themselves from Daniel.
You think?
Basically saying, we can't help what the crazy people say. Don't put that on me. Don't put that voodoo on me, Ricky Bobby. Yeah. Has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
On the upside, he did get his GED. He took some college courses while he's been in prison. Then in 2017, at the age of 46, Daniel appealed for a reduced sentence after that pesky Supreme Court ruling that juveniles cannot be sentenced to life in prison without parole. And Daniel had been in prison for 30 years with his dragon blood and his honeysuckle and segregated ass, and he hoped that his sentence...
Oh, wait. Don't forget the carrot cake.
And the carrot cake. And he hoped that his sentence would be changed so he could serve his life sentences concurrently instead of consecutively, which would make him eligible for parole right then and there in 2017 instead of 2032.
Gotcha.
Now, the families of the Gustafsons were outraged, as you might imagine.
Absolutely.
And by this time, Andrew had also passed away at the age of 60. But Priscilla's siblings were there, and Daniel apologized to them. Quote, I do not have the words to fully express my profound sorrow, but I'm truly sorry for the harm that I've caused. From the very essence of who I am, from the depths of my soul, I am sorry.
Yeah, well, thanks, Daniel. Now, put him back away.
End quote.
Yeah.
And honestly, I should have read that in a monotone because everybody in the courtroom thought it was just an act, including the judge who thought he was stony-faced and didn't even make eye contact while giving his apology. It was very hollow.
Right.
So it's like, but I am truly sorry for the harm that I have caused, like that.
Right.
And the Middlesex Superior Court Judge, Helene Kazanjian, was unmoved, saying, quote, Mr. LaPlante has not been rehabilitated, end quote. She formally resentenced Daniel to his original sentence, 3 life sentences to be served consecutively.
Perfect.
He could ask for parole after 45 years, again in 2032. Andrew Gustafson, although he passed away from cancer in 2014, he did remarry a woman named Carol. She was a widow, and together they had 2 daughters. After Andrew left his law practice, he began working for the state as a child advocate.
Oh, good for him.
And Andrew said back in 2007, quote, he could take them, but he could not stop my hope, faith, and building a new life, end quote.
Good for him.
Which is really well said.
Yeah.
Yeah, we all have to power through, right?
Absolutely. Keep swimming.
As for the Bowens, they've stayed out of the spotlight, although Frank gave an interview after Daniel was caught saying, quote, if Daniel LaPlante does not get convicted and gets out again, I will personally kill him, end quote. This was in the newspaper.
Yeah, that pretty much says it all.
His family had fled their home at 93 Lawrence Street and actually put it up for sale after the frogging incident. And then after the murders, he took his daughters to an undisclosed location, not even telling the relatives where they were, because Danny still had links to kids that his daughters went to school with.
Wow.
Interestingly enough, there's a Netflix film called Aftermath. I've seen it. It came out in 2021. It's based off of 2 really weird crimes. One of them is Danny living in the walls and frogging in the house.
Wow.
And the other is a couple in San Diego who had some weird things happen, like subscriptions that they didn't sign up for showing up at the house, weird things happening in the house. But in this movie, Aftermath, there's a guy frogging. He's living in the walls of their dream home.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you hear that knocking in the wall, Is it a ghost?
Right.
Is it the radiator?
When you hear the squirrels running across the roof.
I even wrote in here, is the heat kicking on? Is it the squirrels? The squirrels love to run across the roof
of your office.
Where my office is. It makes me crazy.
Yeah.
Or is somebody frogging in your home?
Yeah.
Things to think about.
I don't want to think about it.
Lock your doors, people.
Yeah.
Everybody lock your doors and stay safe. But that's the story of Daniel J. LaPlante. And that's all I have to say about that. Hey, Hitched to Homicide listeners. This is Chris Calvert. I love doing research and writing about real crimes, but I also love writing about fictional people who commit horrible atrocities. When you're ready to take a break from true crime for fictional crime, go to chriscalvert.com, where you'll find all my books, including some free ones to get you started. Jane Doe is one badass chick who quietly hunts terrorists in the United States. The Sex and Lies books are all FBI and CIA cases with a little romance on the side. And coming summer 2022, Book 10 in the series, Sex, Lies, and Rock and Roll, releases. You can find all of these books everywhere, and if you like to listen instead of read, you can find them all on Audible. So go grab a free book or take a listen. I love all the characters I've written. I've given them pain, ruined their lives, make them suffer, and maybe even throw in a heroic death. Or maybe they live to fight another day. Check it all out at chriscalvert.com, and thanks for being a listener of Hitched to Homicide.
Daniel, he was just a little bit sloppy.
He's a piece of work, isn't he?
Oh my God.
He's in jail.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, rot in jail, stay in jail.
Yeah.
Yeah. The Gustafson family, and rightly so, feel that way.
You can crouch under your cell bed and act like you're
Yeah, you can
frogging.
Go frog through the jail.
Yeah.
Good luck with that.
All right. Well, let's change the topic now and do a little, well, bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
Okay. I've got 5 real short ones this week.
Oh my God, 5.
Yeah. We've got 5 of them.
You've been doing your research.
Absolutely. All right. Okay. Number 1. The cops caught a suspect when his loud farts gave away his hiding spot. I love that. It happened outside Kansas City in July. The police didn't release a ton of details, but really, what else do you need to know?
Nothing.
Exactly.
That's just something that men would think is funny. Yeah.
All right. Number 2, an astronaut was accused of committing the first crime in space.
What?
NASA's Anne McClain was accused of illegally accessing her estranged wife's bank account. Yeah, I know. From the International Space Station during a mission. She denied it. It's not clear what happened with the case since then.
There's a digital footprint even in space.
There is.
Yeah. There's nothing to hide, people.
Okay, number 3, and people have heard about this, but I still think it's ridiculously stupid and funny. Number 3, the teenager who licked a tub of ice cream and put it back.
Yeah.
Yeah, the video went viral and started a whole big thing back in July. At least one copycat got arrested, and a few stores briefly started putting their ice cream behind lock and key.
Oh, like the cigarettes.
Yeah,
and
now
stuff.
here's the kicker.
The Nicorette. You got to go get your Nicorette and your
Yeah.
ice cream behind lock and key.
But listen to this. It turns out it's a felony. Food tampering can get you up to 20 years in jail.
Good.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to open their ice cream. Well, a lot of them have a plastic seal around them now,
right.
too.
Yep,
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, number 4. A groom robbed a bank the day before his wedding to pay for the ring and venue. Cops charged...
That's love, honey. That's love.
It is. Cops charged 36-year-old Heath Bumpus.
The Bumpuses.
With aggravated robbery, and the wedding was canceled.
I bet.
Okay. In other relationship troubles, a guy in Oklahoma stole a Pepsi truck to drive to the airport and catch his girlfriend before she left him. But instead, he rear-ended an empty school bus and got arrested. So that's just a little addition to that number 4.
What?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Okay. And last but not least, number 5, one of my favorites, 5 hitmen got busted after they all kept subcontracting the hit. All right. Yeah, I know. Now follow me. A businessman in China hired a hitman to kill a guy who was suing him. That hitman hired another hitman. who hired another hitman, who hired another hitman, who hired yet another hitman. All of them are now in jail.
I counted them off to make sure there were really 5.
I know. Nobody wanted to actually do the deed, so they kept hiring somebody else.
Oh, gosh.
Well, that's all I have for, bless your heart.
Well, their hearts need blessing. And if you know somebody whose heart needs blessing, or you have a suggestion for a case, you can email us.
Yes.
At Chris@Hitched to Homicide, or you can go to our website.
Yep.
Just pull down the menu. There's forms for both of them. We love hearing from you. We do have a running list, I promise.
Yep.
Every single one of them have been logged. We've got them all.
Yep.
They're great. And you guys are pretty good about it, too.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's all we have for today. That's my wonderful husband out there.
And that's my beautiful bride in the booth.
We'll see you next time on Hitched to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.